Joining us right now is Dr. Andrew Bostom, professor of medicine at Brown University, prolific author on issues involving militant Islam. And Andrew, always good to talk to you, sir.
Hi, Steve. Good to be with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. We played that. We'll get to Boko Haram and this hashtag kind of foreign policy if we have time. But obviously, what I want to start with is a story that is so horrific and so typical, unfortunately. A pregnant Sudanese Christian has been sentenced to death by hanging, no less, for, and many people don't know what apostasy is, but you explain it and talk about this case.
Well, Steve, I just learned there's a minimal update to this terrific story. The Sharia court apparently is allowing her to give birth. She's 8 to 9 months pregnant. She already has an 18 to 20-month-old toddler who's actually incarcerated with her, and that toddler is a U.S. citizen, by the way. But she's being permitted to come to term, deliver her baby, and then get 100 lashes and then be hanged. So I guess this is the moderate variation on the theme here. In brief, she is a graduate of the medical school in Khartoum. She's a Christian who has practiced Christianity since her father, who was a Muslim, abandoned the family when she was a child of 6 years of age. Her mother's an Ethiopian Orthodox Christian. She married a U.S. citizen Christian several years ago. Like I said, they have a 20-month-old toddler son. Now she's pregnant with her second child. Some disgruntled relative filed charges against her about a year ago, which led to her being convicted of not only apostasy, in other words, because the father was a Muslim, she's supposed to be a Muslim all her life, ignoring the fact that she was raised by her mother.
Apostasy is if you renounce your religion or change your religion from Islam to something else.
Absolutely, but in this case, even that is factually challenged, shall we say, because she really was raised by the mother, who was a Christian. Now, in Islam, a Muslim man is allowed to marry a Christian woman, and then the children are supposed to be brought up Muslim. But what happens when he abandons the family? I mean, so it's just preposterous. But at any rate, she considers herself lifelong to be a Christian. These scurrilous charges were filed against her. She's been imprisoned basically since February with the 20-month-old toddler. And then last Sunday, she was convicted not only of apostasy, but of adultery, because after all, she's supposed to be a lifelong Muslim. She's not allowed to marry a Christian man. And then she was given 3 days to quote unquote recant, which she did not. She is a devout Christian. She told the Sharia judge that she's been a Christian all her life and that she has never apostatized. There were imams in the courtroom up to the last minute trying to get her to convert to Islam. And at that point, the judge announced her decision, announced the decision that was rendered upon her, which is that she was to be hanged for apostasy. But wait, before that, she was to be lashed 100 times.
I got to tell you, I cannot believe that we are living in 2014. I cannot believe, although I can believe, that this goes on and our media, for the most part, stays silent. If this were happening to a gay person somewhere, although maybe not, they don't come down on Iran for stoning gays to death, so I don't know what their deal is there either. But it's any member of the media who has the blessing and the privilege of a microphone and is in a position where they could do a story like this and they choose not to, or any editor in that same position, it should be, not only should be ashamed of themselves, they have to answer to God, I believe. Because, I mean, how do you ignore this? And our government? What has been the reaction of our government, our devout Christian president in the White House? Has he said anything about this?
It's absolutely preposterous. It gets worse, Steve. About a month or so ago, or maybe even longer, the distraught husband, again, a U.S. citizen, a Christian from the southern Sudan originally, but a naturalized U.S. citizen who his home is in New Hampshire. He petitioned the embassy in Khartoum, the U.S. embassy in Khartoum, to help. Initially, he was told that they were just disinterested in the case. He persisted, and then was told he brought the marriage certificate, the birth certificate of the toddler that's imprisoned with the mother, and was then told that he had to give blood for a DNA sample to prove paternity before they would consider acting. This is the callousness with which our embassy reacted. This part of the story has barely been reported. You will see a press release yesterday from the State Department that neglected to even mention that the toddler incarcerated with the mother in the women's prison outside of Khartoum is a U.S. citizen. I mean, it's absolutely preposterous.
It's preposterous. It really is. All right, so where are we right now? I mean, was what you said at the beginning, is that where we are right now, that update?
Yeah, that's the last update that I saw today from the reporting in the London Telegraph, was that, you know, there's I've seen earlier stories which suggested she might even be able to postpone the sentence until the newborn is weaned from, you know, so she could breastfeed until they complete the sentence.
Live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, we're back with Andrew Bostom here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Andrew, we got cut off by the break before. I just want to ask you, how commonplace are these kinds of things, like what's going on in Sudan, to this poor woman?
Well, I just wanted to read you a comment from the Sudan Minister of Information, which is actually a very forthright and honest comment, which reflects the pervasiveness of these attitudes. This was after the conviction was announced on Sunday, and then that, as I mentioned, there was a several days reprieve she was given to recant, you know, and basically convert to Islam. But in that interim, the Sudan Minister of Information was interviewed, and here was his comment. He was very defiant, but he was frank. He said, "It's not only Sudan, in Saudi Arabia, in all the Muslim countries, it is not allowed at all for a Muslim to change his religion," unquote. Now, however, what's so brazen about this is that usually these situations, first of all, there's a great disincentive to convert to any other religion because of the Sharia mandated penalty of death for apostasy. But if an apostate is killed, it's usually an extrajudicial killing. It's really not common for the state to literally execute one of its own citizens in public on charges like this. That's what makes this particularly egregious. In other words, it's bad enough that these extrajudicial killings take place or that people are incarcerated. Yeah. Often what will happen is that the apostate will be incarcerated, to pardon my French, they'll have the crap beat out of them until they recant. You know, because it's not a good situation to have people leaving Islam if you want the Sharia to be kept in place.
Again, a silent world, a silent media, and a silent White House and State Department here in the United States. It's just mind-boggling. All right, let's move on to Boko Haram and this, you know, this hashtag diplomacy, as it's being called, or hashtag fighting of terrorism. Here's what got me. And I've talked about this over and over all week. Last Saturday, Michelle Obama took the place of Barack Obama and gave the weekly address. And she made it sound, and we played the sound bites, that Boko Haram, if you just came in from Mars, or if you didn't know Boko Haram, you would think that Boko Haram came on the scene when they kidnapped these girls. And as horrific as that is, and as much as my heart goes out to all of them, and I hope they get these girls back, and I hope they blow away all those terrorists who did it, the point is, she made it sound for 6-7 minutes that Boko Haram is all about denying girls an education. Now, she called them terrorists, but she called them terrorists for denying girls an education. She failed to mention that in February, they slit the throats and shot in the back about 60 boys in a boarding school there and then set the place on fire. She failed to mention the churches that the Boko Haram people have overrun and set on fire and the Christians they've killed. She failed to mention the thousands of villagers that are killed routinely by Boko Haram. No, all they are is about denying young girls an education. As sad as that situation is with the girls, Andrew, the misinformation, the disinformation by omission made me sick.
It's preposterous. First of all, what's being underreported about this particularly horrific kidnapping and enslavement, let's be honest about it, is that 90% of those captured were Christians. So once again, they really are targeting Christians. In fact, some of those that have gotten away, it's alleged that most of those who've gotten away were sort of passively let go because they were Muslims. But beyond that, Steve, the whole context of this has been wildly distorted. This goes back to jihad depredations that literally date from the beginning of the 19th century and have to do with the violent Islamization by a jihadist movement back then. And we have, unfortunately, in Sudan's history, in the intervening 2 centuries, there's been these recurrent movements to forcibly impose the Sharia, originally on animist populations, then with the colonial period, some of the Christianization of the area on Christian populations. It has gone on and on and on. And the aim of Boko Haram, who are in the tradition of these jihadist movements, very plain, straightforward, is to make sure that there's the strict application of the Sharia in Nigeria, period. That is their mission.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm not sure. Look, I'm glad the world has coalesced around these girls, and I'm glad the world has awakened to Boko Haram, even though Hillary Clinton for 2 years refused to designate them as a terrorist group, even at the behest of congressmen here in the U.S., which is something she's going to have to explain. But awakening to Boko Haram and celebrating that awakening by leaving out who they are is almost as bad as ignoring who they are, in my opinion.
Well, also, Steve, there's been an ugly phenomenon below the surface in Nigeria, particularly in the north, which is Muslim dominated, which is that the so-called moderate Muslims in Nigeria really have a lot of the same aims as their more violent brethren. And therefore, there's been a passivity in the way they deal with this situation. A great 20th century historian of the whole situation in Nigeria, who died in 1994, wrote in 1993 that he felt that reliance on moderate Muslims in Nigeria was absolutely pointless. They had essentially rejected any form of secular experimentation.
Well, Andrew, that might explain a lot about why Nigeria hasn't gone after that terrorist group. Hey, Andrew, thank you. Fascinating 2 segments. Keep us on top of what's going on. We'll speak to you again, sir.
Take care, Steve.